So Ken, you were one of the few reporters, frankly, and certainly one of the few national reporters who was on top of this story from the get-go. And you, to some extent, watched it go from beginning, middle to end. It is a bizarre story about a 20-year-old U.S. Marine who abandoned his base at one point with heavy weapons. All right, start at the beginning. Like, when did we first hear a report of this guy gone missing?
Well, unfortunately, the character of the reporting was almost uniformly, this very deferent kind of, oh, this, poor soldier who wants to keep us safe is lost. Please try to help him so that he can be reunited with his family. We don't know exactly what happened. And there didn't seem to be much skepticism about, what may have happened, why the military wasn't telling anyone about it. And so that was sort of the backdrop that I started looking into this.
And where tell me, like, where is this located? I mean, who are we talking about here?
Okay, so this guy's name is Job Wallace. He's a Marine Corps Lance Corporal. He was stationed at Camp Pendleton in California. He had gone on leave for a few days, and he was supposed to return on the 18th of September, I believe, and he didn't appear on that day. Of course, in the military, that's a serious infraction to not show up after a certain amount of time elapses. That becomes desertion, which is a very serious offense.
So, okay, so we're talking about he goes on leave for how many days is it supposedly? So he's supposed to come back the 18th of September. When did he leave for leave?
So he went to Arizona and stayed with, I believe, his family for, I think it was just a few days, maybe 4 days or so. And then when he was supposed to return, not only did he not return, he disappeared, and then they ended up actually getting a picture from a CBP, must have been some kind of border patrol unit spotted his vehicle with the license plate at the border, and so that was in the. If you look at a map, it's in the. They saw it. They saw him he went in the opposite direction of where Pendleton, which is in California. He ended up going. I believe they saw him at the border of Texas, the Texas Mexico border.
Okay, so he's spending some time with some family. He's supposed to go back to California. September 18th rolls around. He's not there. People are concerned that maybe he's had some type of episode, or that he's bumped his head, and this is one of those amnesia cases. But his truck, or his car is located, or at least seen by Customs and Border Patrol down towards Texas, which is the opposite direction from Pendleton. So when was that?
This all happened in a pretty short span of time. I believe they saw him there. I'm looking at the document now. They saw him there on the, let's see here, 17th of September.
Okay. And so then what happens? So this story is there's a missing 20-year-old Marine. He's probably confused or disoriented or something like this, right?
Right. And so, unfortunately, federal law enforcement and the Defense Department are very vague on details. They just say, that they're looking into it. The family starts a, Facebook page and kind of social media push that the media helps to a great extent, which I don't blame the family. I can understand, them just wanting it back and that being their priority. But, the media ends up printing this, and then no sort of attempt to kind of suss out from either the military or law enforcement what may have happened. And so, the public is just largely in the dark as to why this person's missing until I got the document.
Okay, so they don't. So none of the officials say anything that would cause any alarm, other than this guy could be out there and could be, the implication is he could be a danger to himself. I mean, we hear about this, from time to time. I would imagine everybody does in their community. Someone's gone missing, a young person's gone missing. We don't know where they are. Hopefully nothing has happened to him. And so at this point, is this when you noticed this story?
Yes, I was a little upset at the nature of the coverage. because it was mostly just quoting, the mother saying, how innocuous this person was and how, we should help to get him back, which of course, I do want him back. I don't want him to get hurt, but it struck me as a little tone deaf, and to just go off of what the parents were saying, because, I don't hold it against the parents that they're going to want to see the best in their child, but that doesn't maybe seem the most objective source of information for what may have happened, And generally in stories like this, you can, a lot of people have sources in the Marines that he would have served with or in law enforcement. And they could have, I think, pretty quickly found out what the context was, but that never came out.
So, all right. So, Ken, let me understand this, and just be careful when you're talking into whatever device you're talking into. Just keep it straight. So you just happen to see this article. It strikes you as like, hey, wait a second, this is weird. They've done this report on this a Marine. Did the article say that he was missing with weapons?
Yes. So according to a situation report produced by the FBI and disseminated to federal law enforcement partners, it said that he had disappeared with let's see here, an ACR automatic rifle, a semi-automatic shotgun, an M14 rifle, and a SIG-9. And in addition to that, that prior to his disappearance, he had claimed to be hearing voices, and I'm quoting from the report here, indicated that he wanted to get rid of child traffickers at the border. And then there was also a report that he had at least one gun. They knew for a fact that he had at least one gun in his vehicle, according to the report anyways.
So, Ken, to be clear, you see this report, and in this original story, you see it says this guy's gone missing. He's got some heavy weaponry. Oh, also, he was hearing voices, and he was talking about child trafficking?
Yes.
And there's no alarm bells that are being rung by anybody. It's just like, typical guy missing with heavy weaponry from the Marines, and is talking about child trafficking. For me, I would say that's a big problem. There should be some real, this should not be just like, let's put his picture on the back of a milk thing. Let's find this guy.
Yeah, I agree. And I should stress that the FBI also thought that too, because in the report they say that he, quote, may pose a threat of violence towards law enforcement or civilians. And the actual headline of the report itself is, quote, possible threat to law enforcement or civilians from U.S. PER, that stands for U.S. Person Job Wallace, as of September 2019. So unfortunately, the possible threat, they say both to law enforcement and civilians, only the law enforcement side of that ended up hearing that. Unfortunately, the civilians didn't hear that.
So wait a second. So this is a report, this report that you're referring to, this is not what was written up in the newspaper. This is a report that you got a hold of.
That's right. It was leaked to me from, I have to be vague to protect sources, but it was from a federal official that, had direct knowledge of what was going on.
And were you looking for this report? I mean, how did this official end up leaking it to you? Did you say it on Twitter that you're looking into this, or does anybody know about this, or were you noodling around?
I'm fairly well connected in the sort of law enforcement world, and so I don't know, everyone by any means, but once you start to know a certain critical mass of people, then they will. I probably know enough people that they know people all over the place and have a lot of insight. So usually if I ask somebody, they can find someone that knows about whatever the issue is.
There was a news report about a 20-year-old Marine who had not returned back to Camp Pendleton after an R&R time with his family. The family was worried about him. The mother was basically the only source for this article. You saw that. It seemed weird to you. You did some sniffing around. You got hold of this report. Who issued this report and just be specific as to what it said?
So this came from the FBI's Phoenix division. And as I mentioned a moment ago, this was it's called a situation information report. It's supposed to notify people of in the FBI of it's supposed to alert them to situations that they should respond to promptly. And it's really a warning to law enforcement about the threat that this guy poses. And as I mentioned before, they also note that he poses a threat to civilians. as well, but unfortunately the civilians didn't hear about it. And the report is extremely detailed, and it's based, according to it, on two separate sources. And so this wasn't just one person calling in who maybe had a grievance. It says source A describes them as a call into this agency, and then source B, a contact who is reporting for the first time. They sort of convey the details of a disappearance, and then there's also a bit of a narrative at the end of it where they say, quote, Wallace has given away or abandoned several valuable personal items recently. He has also cleared all personal belongings from his room at Camp Pendleton prior to departing for Surprise. That's the town in Arizona that his family lives. And then it ends saying, Wallace indicated he has been dissatisfied with his life in the Marine Corps and had mentioned on multiple occasions his desire to travel to Mexico to, quote, take out cartel members and traffickers, end quote.
So there's this basically secret report, at least the public can't see it, that there may be a Marine who is heavily armed, who is going out to engage in some type of vigilante justice that involves the border. And this is all happening within, in the wake of what took place in El Paso. And so is there a protocol to warn the public? Like, hey, that cuddly piece you saw in the newspaper, well, the story's a little bit darker than that, and he may be very dangerous. Like, did the public have any sense that this guy could be dangerous? Was there any sense that the law enforcement was seeking the public's help in trying to find this guy? Or was it just like, we're just going to let it lie and see where the chips fall?
Well, the family was certainly seeking the public's help. And again, I don't necessarily hold them against that. I'm sure it's a difficult situation if something like this happens to your child. But the federal agencies at no point disputed that or warned the public, be careful, don't necessarily go up to this guy. They never said anything disputing what was being said. Now, as to protocol, obviously for ongoing investigations, there are certain operational things that tend to have to be withheld. But what was surprising to me about this is that I do think that notifying the public could have, helped people to, maybe not go up to this guy and slap on the shoulder and say, hey, we've got to get you in touch with someone at the base or whatever. So, and actually the source that provided me this, I quote them in my article, said that their motive for providing this was that they were shocked and outraged that the FBI refused to notify the public about the potential threat of the individual.
So what is is this indicative of a bigger problem? In other words, are there multiple of these things happening all the time that we just don't hear about because you didn't just happen to come along by it and get a little suspicious?
I'm afraid so, because, I have to speculate a little bit, but I imagine that, I know for a fact that federal agencies tend to try to help each other, and this would be a very embarrassing case. For the Marines, I wouldn't be at all surprised if they had just hoped that they could resolve this case and kind of, hope that no one poked around and found out exactly what the context was, because I actually went on this individual's social media because I didn't know if it was just a sort of straightforward case of mental illness, or if there was a political component to it. Because when he, according to the report, says take out cartel members and traffickers, that could be, euphemisms for, how do you know who a cartel member is? Just be
right.
A person at the border and be paranoid and think that they're someone else. So I started looking at this person's social media, and I quickly found there's a picture of him posing in front of Trump Tower. There's a bunch of pictures of him posing with different automatic weapons. And then I went on his Twitter account, and he follows President Trump, Trump's son, some alt-right account that seems to be talking about birth rates in the West declining and how that's a problem. And I'm not cherry-picking either. If you look at the account, he only followed something like 14 different accounts, and there was no sort of diversity in terms of what he was following. It all seemed to be right-wing kind of Trumpian politics, if you will. So all of that seemed to suggest to me that there was a political component to it. And if that's the case, and if these sources referenced in the FBI report were Marines who he served with, then I could see why the military wouldn't want this to come out, because they may have had some sort of foreknowledge about this person's state of mind, and that of course creates problems for them.
Wow. Okay. So we got 2 minutes left. What happens next? I mean, how did this resolve? And go ahead.
I'm sorry. Fortunately, he ends up being apprehended in Texas without incident, and he's sent back to Brig, which, if you know the military, that I've spoken to several people that I know in the defense world, active informer, and they all say that this means that it's pretty likely that he's going to be discharged and you don't get sent to the Brig unless it's a very serious kind of thing. But unfortunately, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, who took point on this, that's sort of the DoD's investigative arm, they still have not said what the sort of circumstances surrounding why he's been sent to the Brig, why he was arrested instead of just escorted back to base or whatever. So they have yet to go on record about any of this. Fortunately, I've been speaking to other reporters who are shortly going to verify my report from their own sources, and so I hope that gets this out, and then sort of triggers a discussion about these agencies should probably notify the public in certain cases.
Well, that's the big story here, is that we don't know how many of these incidents happen on any given day, week, month.
Right.
We don't know if this is a larger problem, both in terms of what it could have represented in terms of like political violence, or if it's a larger problem in terms of what it represents in terms of the sort of controls that the military has or the federal agencies exhibit when warning us about a potential threat here. Folks can follow you on Twitter and check out TYT for a follow-up on this story, which I imagine you'll be doing in terms of the overall policy. Ken Klippenstein, fascinating work. Congratulations to you, because I think important story that hopefully will command more attention.